Beacon Press Audio presents A Deeper Sickness, Journal of America in the Pandemic Year by Margaret Peacock and Erik L. Peterson. This audiobook is narrated by Raquel Razan, published by Beacon Press Audio 2022. Introduction. This journal recounts in detail the 4 pandemics: disease, disinformation, poverty, and violence that charged through the United States like the proverbial horsemen of the apocalypse in the year 2020. During this calendar year, nearly 400,000 Americans died of COVID-19, the disease caused by a novel coronavirus. Beginning in April, the country erupted into protest, some opposing public health restrictions, others marching to stop the slaughter of black men and women by white authorities. The experience changed how we learned, ate, shopped, worked, socialized, practiced medicine, grieved, celebrated, and died. We saw bright spots, moments of great heroism and sacrifice. And yet, in the United States, 2020 will long be known as a time of grief, frustration, confusion, loneliness, and even rage. Could it have turned out differently? Journalists and scholars are already uncovering the missteps made by those in power in early 2020 that failed to contain SARS-CoV-2 once it appeared in the U.S. In this book, in which we follow America as eyewitnesses to the tumult of the entire year, we are after a different question. Is there something in the character of the place, the bones of America, that made the layers of tragedy that unfolded in 2020 practically unavoidable? As professional historians, we spend our lives trying to make sense of the past, in part so that we can better understand the present. For a full year, we turned our attention to daily events and the historical contexts of this year's multiple pandemics in the hope of understanding both how we got here and how we might prevent ever returning. In January, Erik L. Peterson, a historian and philosopher of science and medicine, began following the outbreak of this new coronavirus, collecting primary sources for his course on the global history of epidemics at the University of Alabama. Independently, Margaret Peacock, an expert on propaganda, Russia, the Middle East, and the Cold War, decided to do the same for a course on the history of media and propaganda. An incidental conversation in the spring after our university moved courses online inspired us to merge projects. We constructed this book as a journal, written mostly in real time as the year unspooled. Each day, we tracked hundreds of news stories, reports, tweets, posts, blogs, speeches, and videos from across the political spectrum, intent on capturing how people encountered these moments and what historical factors informed their understandings of the events unfolding around them. Of course, no one could describe a singular American experience of 2020. Instead, we set out to provide a wide range of glimpses into individual, subjective encounters with the chaos of this year by recruiting and interviewing a large and diverse group of people from different races, ethnicities, classes, political beliefs, and geographic regions willing to share their expertise and experiences. Dozens of scholars, politicians, activists, physicians, epidemiologists, attorneys, nurses, and public health experts helped us make meaning of the headlines. We also received invaluable insights from regular folks who unpacked their unique perspectives and made this book the expansive, heart-wrenching project that it became. This canvassing of 2020 required an effort larger than ourselves, and we are forever grateful for the work of so many. We acknowledge the ways this story is deeply subjective, shaped by our own expertise as historians and educators living and working far from the media hubs on both coasts. As such, we wrote this chronicle in the first person. When we need to speak about ourselves, it is with one collective, I, with each entry reflecting a thorough braiding of each of our experiences and each of our years of training and research leading up to this moment. One point we want to underscore in this book is how difficult it often was to understand what was happening around us during the pandemic. We want to show how mistaken we were at times, how distorted time felt, how surprisingly powerless and ignorant we all turned out to be despite our best efforts to stay informed and empowered. We researched and wrote all day, every day, frenetically, yet lived in a state of focused confusion for most of that exhausting year. We had to, of course. Contrary to how most academic histories are composed, including our own work, there could be no outline, no thesis. We could not know which events could turn out to be mundane, which could become historic. They all felt like both, all the time. So we took each day as it came, reading and watching and writing. As frantic days rolled one into another, crescendos piling on top of each other, inevitably we made mistakes. Rather than fixing them in the editing process, we preserve them here as a treatment to the tumult of the year. We see value in them. For while historians in the next decade or century will no doubt shed more dispassionate clarity on 2020, they will not be able to grasp the messy immediacy of documenting it while living it, that constant sense that the ground under us was quicksand. We constructed an expansive digital museum as a companion to the book at deepersickness.com. It displays the thousands of sources we curated over the year, the hundreds of pages of additional content we wrote that did not fit into the printed book, a collection of eyewitness narratives from contributors recounting their experiences with this year, and an exhibit space highlighting original research on 2020 from scholars and students around the country. We encourage you to engage with our voluminous research and add your stories to the historical record. We created this digital museum for 3 reasons. First, we wanted to preserve the anxieties, sorrows, pains, fears, angers, boredom, and even unexpected joys of this experience, including as many voices as we can. We collected many and hope to collect more. These stories take up more space than a printed book allows, but they are invaluable nonetheless and worth saving. Second, we built this site to preserve our sources before they disappear. Too many of the internet-based materials we use to construct the project are ephemeral. We like to imagine that our modern data is saved forever somewhere in the cloud, but tweets, Facebook, Instagram posts, even news stories disappear like individual raindrops into a river. On deepersickness.com, we have saved as much as we could. Third, we preserved our sources for readers to view because the recounting of history is a perennial battleship. How we remember the past shapes everything we do. It defines us in the present and shapes what choices we will make in the future. Inevitably, some readers will disagree with our analysis of these events. In hindsight, we might disagree with ourselves in 2020 as well. Please, readers, examine the sources for yourselves. Preserving sources from 2020 makes it more difficult for people in the future to ignore or gloss over certain realities about this experience. Americans, as we found, too often substitute folklore for history. As we heard story after story of grief and loss, the question, was the tragedy of 2020 inevitable, and if so, why, kept reoccurring. Tracing day after day, certain pre-existing conditions that shaped this year came into focus. The way a physician armed with a family medical history might see a chronic illness behind a patient's present symptoms. 3 historical factors in particular made America sicker than we should have been in 2020. A. Entrenched racial hierarchies. B. An economic structure dependent on individual accumulation of wealth and widespread consumption of ephemeral goods and entertainment. C. Distraction, cognitive dissonance, and an intentional historical amnesia that prevented the majority of comfortable, well-intentioned, middle-class white Americans like ourselves from doing anything about the first 2 issues. These factors channeled 74 million people, nearly 47% of all votes cast.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?